The dust storm came swirling across the plains like a demon's breath, obscuring everything in its path as Eliza Cole struggled against the ropes cutting into her wrists. The tracks beneath her vibrated with the distant promise of a coming train, each tremor sending terror through her body. Her captors, the Blackburn Gang, had left her there to die punishment for her father's refusal to sell his land to the railroad company that employed them. "Help!" Eliza screamed, her voice lost in the howling wind. She was 22, too young to die, her honey-blonde hair whipping across her face as she fought against her bindings. The dust coated her throat, making each breath more difficult than the last. The Blackburns had made sure everyone in town knew what would happen to those who defied Western Pacific Rail. They'd dragged her from her father's ranch in broad daylight, parading her down Main Street before bringing her here, miles from Redemption Creek. No one had dared to help, not with the Blackburns' reputation for ruthless efficiency. As the vibrations grew stronger, Eliza's struggle intensified. Death was coming on iron wheels, thundering toward her at 40 miles an hour. She closed her eyes, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Then she heard it, the rhythm of hooves, different from the train's mechanical rumbling. Her eyes flew open as a figure emerged from the swirling dust, a tall silhouette on horseback. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, rushing toward her. Eliza saw a man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His movements were quick and decisive as he pulled a knife from his belt. "Hold still," he commanded, his voice low and steady as he cut through the ropes. "Train's coming." The moment the ropes fell away, he pulled her to her feet, half carrying her away from the tracks, just as the locomotive broke through the dust cloud, its whistle shrieking like a banshee as it barreled past them. When the danger had passed, the stranger turned to her, his expression grave beneath the wide brim of his hat. "You're coming home," he said simply, as though rescuing women tied to railroad tracks was something he did every day. Eliza's legs gave way beneath her, the shock and relief too much to bear. The stranger caught her before she hit the ground. "Name's Patrick Adler," he said, lifting her onto his horse with surprising gentleness. "Most folks call me Pat." "Eliza Cole," she managed, her voice barely audible over the retreating sound of the train. "They'll kill you for this. The Blackburns don't forgive." A ghost of a smile crossed Patrick's face. "Neither do I, Miss Cole." He mounted behind her, one arm secure around her waist. "Neither do I." The ride back to Redemption Creek should have taken hours, but Patrick knew the land better than most. He guided his chestnut mare through ravines and dry creek beds, taking shortcuts that wouldn't appear on any map. "Why?" Eliza finally asked, when she had recovered enough to speak properly. "Why risk your life for me?" Patrick was silent for so long, she thought he might not answer. "I've been tracking the Blackburns for 6 months, he finally said. "They killed my brother." Eliza felt his body tense against her back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be sorry. Be ready. They'll come for you again, and they'll come for me now too." As the town came into view, Eliza felt a fresh wave of fear. "I can't go home. They'll look for me there first." Patrick nodded, changing direction slightly. "I know a place." The place turned out to be a small cabin nestled against a rocky outcrop, partially hidden by a grove of cottonwood trees. It looked abandoned at first glance, but Eliza noticed the fresh-cut firewood stacked neatly against the wall. "My brother's place," Patrick explained, helping her down from the horse. "Mine now, I guess." Inside was simple but clean, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a cast-iron stove, a narrow bed in the corner. Patrick moved around the space with practiced ease, lighting the stove and putting on a pot of coffee. "You should rest," he said, gesturing to the bed. "I'll keep watch." Eliza wanted to protest, to say she wasn't tired, but the events of the day crashed over her like a wave, and suddenly standing took more effort than she could muster. "What about my father? He'll be worried sick." "I'll send word once I'm sure it's safe." Patrick handed her a cup of water. "The Blackburns think you're dead. Let's keep it that way for now." Too exhausted to argue, Eliza sank onto the bed. "Thank you," she murmured, her eyes already closing, "for saving my life." The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Patrick sitting by the window, his rifle across his knees, his gaze fixed on the darkening land beyond. Morning came with the scent of coffee and bacon. Eliza woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the previous day's events came rushing back. She sat up quickly, wincing at her sore muscles. Patrick stood at the stove, his back to her. He'd removed his dusty coat and hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Without turning, he said, "There's water in the basin if you want to wash up." Eliza swung her legs over the side of the bed, noticing for the first time that her boots had been removed. "How did you know I was awake?" Now he did turn, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "You stopped snoring." "I do not snore," Eliza protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Like a sawmill," Patrick replied, placing a plate of food on the table. "Eat, you need your strength." As they ate, Eliza studied her rescuer. In the daylight, she could see he wasn't much older than her, perhaps 26 or 27. His hands were calloused, his forearms corded with lean muscle visible where he'd rolled up his shirt sleeves. A scar ran along his jawline, pale against his tanned skin. "What?" Patrick asked, catching her stare. Eliza looked down at her plate. "I was just wondering what your plan is. The Blackburns control half the territory between here and Santa Fe. They're not going to stop until they get what they want." "And what do they want?" "My father's land. It sits right where the railroad wants to build their new line. Every other rancher sold out, but Pa refused." Patrick nodded slowly. "I figured it was something like that. The Blackburns do the railroad's dirty work, and in return, they get a cut of every business along the new route." "How do you know so much about them?" Something dark flickered in Patrick's eyes. "My brother was a surveyor for Western Pacific. He found out what the Blackburns were doing, threatening folks, burning out those who wouldn't sell. When he tried to report it, they made an example of him." Eliza set down her fork, her appetite gone. "I'm so sorry." "Like I said, don't be sorry. We're going to stop them." "We? You want your father's land safe? I want justice for my brother. Seems like our interests align." He stood, collecting their plates. "Besides, I doubt you're the type to sit quietly while others fight your battles." Despite everything, Eliza felt a smile tug at her lips. "You've known me for less than a day." "How could you possibly know what type I am?" Patrick's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something passed between them that made her breath catch. "Just a hunch," he said softly. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Patrick moved to the window, his expression hardening. "Stay down," he ordered, reaching for his rifle. Eliza crouched by the wall, her heart hammering in her chest. "Blackburns?" Patrick shook his head. "Just one rider. Looks like—" He relaxed slightly. "It's Sheriff Tanner." Eliza stood. "I know him. He's a friend of my father's." Patrick opened the door as the rider dismounted. Sheriff Tanner was a broad-shouldered man, with a graying mustache and kind eyes that widened in surprise when he saw Eliza. "Miss Cole, your father's half out of his mind with worry." He turned to Patrick, extending his hand. "And you must be the hero I've been hearing about." Patrick accepted the handshake but looked confused. "How did you find us?" "Wasn't hard. When I heard someone rescued a young woman from the railroad tracks, and the description matched a certain cowboy who's been asking questions about the Blackburns, well," he shrugged, "this valley ain't that big." "Is my father all right?" Eliza asked anxiously. The sheriff's expression grew somber. "He's alive, but they roughed him up pretty good. Doc Jenkins is with him now." Anger flared in Eliza's chest. "I need to see him." "That's why I'm here. To bring you home, both of you," the sheriff added, looking at Patrick. "Harold Cole's offering a reward for his daughter's safe return, and protection for whoever brought her back." Patrick shook his head. "I don't want a reward." "You might want the protection, though," Sheriff Tanner said grimly. "The Blackburns are telling everyone they killed you both. When they find out different—" He let the implication hang in the air. Within the hour, they were on horseback, Eliza riding double with Patrick, while Sheriff Tanner led the way. The Cole Ranch lay in a green valley 5 miles east of town, its white farmhouse visible from a distance. As they approached, Eliza felt a knot form in her throat. The barn door hung off its hinges, and several fences had been broken down. Even from a distance, she could see the black scorch marks on one side of the house where someone had tried to start a fire. Her father was waiting on the porch, his right arm in a sling, his face bruised, but his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. Eliza slid from the horse before Patrick had fully stopped, running up the steps and into her father's one-armed embrace. "I thought I'd lost you," Harold Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "When they took you, I tried to follow, but there were too many. It's all right, Pa, I'm safe." She turned to Patrick, who hung back awkwardly. "Thanks to Mr. Adler." Harold Cole studied Patrick for a long moment, then extended his good hand. "I owe you a debt I can never repay, son." Patrick shook the offered hand. "No debt, sir. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Harold replied grimly. "Not in these parts, not with the Blackburns involved." He gestured to the house. "Come inside. You're welcome here for as long as you need." Over a simple meal, they exchanged information. The Blackburns had 8 men, all armed and dangerous. They operated with the unofficial blessing of Western Pacific Rail, which meant they had money and connections. The sheriff could deputize men to help defend the ranch, but many in town feared the Blackburns too much to stand against them. "What about the federal marshal?" Patrick asked. "Surely there's enough evidence of wrongdoing to bring him in." Sheriff Tanner sighed. "Marshal's office is in Denver. By the time we got word to him and he made it here, well," he didn't need to finish the thought. "So we're on our own," Harold concluded. 4 of us against 8 of them, plus whatever hired guns they bring in. 5, Eliza corrected, drawing surprised looks from the men. "I can shoot as well as any of you." Her father started to protest, but Patrick cut him off. "She's right. We need every gun we can get." Harold looked between them, then nodded reluctantly. 5 it is. That night, Patrick took the first watch, sitting on the porch with his rifle across his knees, much as he had at the cabin. Eliza brought him a cup of coffee and sat beside him, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the evening chill. "You should be resting," Patrick said, though he made no move to send her away. "I've rested enough." Eliza looked out at the darkened ranch, the familiar landscape transformed into something ominous by nightfall. "They'll come soon, won't they?" Patrick nodded. "Tomorrow, most likely. They'll want to make sure you're really here first." Eliza turned to him, studying his profile in the dim light from the window. "Why are you really helping us? And don't say it's just about your brother. You could have left me with my father and gone after the Blackburns on your own." Patrick was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "When I found my brother, he had a letter in his pocket. It was to me, warning about what the Blackburns were doing, how they were hurting innocent people. His last words were asking me to help stop them." He looked at Eliza, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "So that's what I'm doing." Eliza reached out, placing her hand over his. "I'm glad you found me," she said softly. Patrick turned his hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "So am I." Morning brought a flurry of activity as they prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Harold, despite his injured arm, helped Sheriff Tanner and his deputy reinforce windows and doors. Patrick took inventory of their weapons and ammunition, grimly noting they had enough for one good fight but not a prolonged siege. Eliza busied herself preparing food and filling water barrels, trying to focus on practical matters rather than the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She was in the kitchen when Patrick found her, his expression serious. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble, "you and your father should leave. Go to Denver, or even further east. Start over somewhere the Blackburns can't reach you." Eliza set down the loaf of bread she'd been slicing with enough force to make the table rattle. "This is our home. We're not abandoning it." "Eliza." "No," she interrupted fiercely. "My mother is buried on that hill over there. This land has been in my father's family for 30 years. We are not running." Patrick ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Then at least you should go. Your father would understand." "I would never forgive myself if I left and something happened to him, or to you," she added, her voice softening on the last words. Something flickered in Patrick's eyes' surprise, followed by a warmth that made her heart skip. He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. "Why would you care what happens to me?" he asked, his voice low. "You barely know me." Eliza couldn't look away from his gaze. "I know enough." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Then the sound of approaching horses shattered the stillness, and Patrick was moving, calling for the sheriff as he reached for his gun. From the window, Eliza counted 3 riders approaching the house slowly, deliberately. Leading them was a man she recognized all too well, Victor Blackburn himself, his shock of white blonde hair visible even at a distance. Patrick joined her at the window, his expression hardening. "That's him, isn't it? The one who had you tied to the tracks?" Eliza nodded, unable to speak past the sudden dryness in her throat. Patrick's hand found hers, squeezing briefly before he moved away. "Stay inside. No matter what happens, stay inside." The 3 men, Harold, Patrick, and Sheriff Tanner, walked out to meet the Blackburns, spreading out on the porch like sentinels. From her vantage point just inside the door, Eliza could hear every word. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Victor Blackburn called, his voice carrying that false friendliness that had always made Eliza's skin crawl. "Seems like we have a misunderstanding to clear up." "No misunderstanding," Harold replied stiffly. "You tried to kill my daughter. That's as clear as day." Blackburn shrugged, as if discussing a minor disagreement rather than attempted murder. "Business, Cole. Just business. You were supposed to take the railroad's offer. Still could, you know. Fair price, new start somewhere else. Everyone walks away happy." "Everyone except the people whose land you steal," Patrick said, his voice cold enough to freeze the summer air. Blackburn's eyes shifted to Patrick, narrowing slightly. "You're the one who interfered with my men's work, aren't you? The one who thinks he's some kind of hero." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Heroes don't live long in these parts, boy. Neither do men who tie women to railroad tracks," Sheriff Tanner interjected, his hand resting deliberately on his holster. "That's murder, Blackburn. I've got a witness ready to testify." "Your word against mine, Sheriff. And in case you haven't noticed, I've got friends in high places." Blackburn leaned forward in his saddle. "Here's what's going to happen. Cole, you're going to sign over your land by sundown tomorrow. As a show of good faith, we'll let your daughter live. Otherwise—" He made a gesture with his hand, mimicking a gun firing. "Get off my property," Harold said, each word deliberate. Blackburn's smile vanished. "You've made your choice, then." He turned his horse, but before riding away, he looked directly at Patrick. "I'll be seeing you real soon, Cowboy." Once the riders were out of sight, Patrick turned to Harold. "They'll be back tonight, with more men." Harold nodded grimly. "Then we'd better be ready." The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. The deputy, a young man named Oliver, returned from town with news that the Blackburns had recruited at least 5 more gunmen. They now faced odds of at least 2 to 1. As sunset approached, Patrick found Eliza in the barn, checking her father's rifle one last time. "You should be in the house," he said, though there was no real reproof in his voice. Eliza didn't look up from her task. "I wanted to make sure everything was ready." Patrick moved closer, leaning against a support beam. "Your father says you're a good shot." "Better than good," Eliza replied without false modesty. "Ma taught me before she died. Said a woman alone on the frontier needed to protect herself. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." Eliza smiled slightly, memories of her mother momentarily overshadowing the present danger. "She was. Pa was devastated when she passed. That's why he'll never leave this place she's here, in every corner of it." Patrick was quiet for a moment, watching her hands move confidently over the rifle. "I understand that kind of devotion," he finally said. "When you find something or someone worth fighting for, you don't just walk away." Eliza looked up, finding his gaze already on her. "Is that why you stayed? Because you found something worth fighting for?" The air between them seemed to still, charged with unspoken feelings. Patrick took a step toward her, then another, until he was close enough that she could see the rapid pulse at his throat. "Eliza," he began, his voice rougher than usual, "if we get through this—" The sound of a gunshot cut him off, followed immediately by a shout from the house. Patrick was moving before the echo died away, Eliza right behind him. They burst out of the barn to see Harold and the sheriff taking cover behind a water trough, exchanging fire with unseen assailants in the growing darkness. "Get to the house!" Patrick shouted to Eliza, drawing his pistol and running toward the men, staying low. Eliza hesitated for only a second before racing to the house. Using the gathering shadows for cover, she made it to the porch unscathed, but as she reached for the door, a bullet splintered the wood inches from her hand. She dropped to her knees. Crawling inside where the deputy waited, his young face pale with fear. "How many?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "At least 10, Oliver replied, swallowing hard. "They're surrounding the place." Eliza moved to a window, staying to one side as she peered out. In the fading light, she could make out shadowy figures moving among the trees and outbuildings. A flash of gunfire illuminated a face, momentarily not Blackburn, but one of his men, a scarred brute they called the Texan. Outside, Patrick had reached Harold and the sheriff, the three men huddled behind their increasingly inadequate cover. "We need to get to the house," Patrick said, flinching as a bullet struck the ground near his foot, spraying dirt. Sheriff Tanner nodded grimly. "I'll draw their fire. You two make a run for it." "Like hell," Harold growled. "This is my fight. Pa!" Eliza's voice cut through the gunfire. She stood in the doorway of the house, partially shielded by the wall, but visible enough to be a target. "Now, all of you!" Her appearance created just enough distraction for the three men to make a desperate dash for the house. Bullets kicked up dust around their feet, but somehow they all made it inside, unharmed. Patrick slammed the door behind them, sliding the heavy oak bar into place. "Are you insane?" he demanded, rounding on Eliza. "You could have been killed." "You're welcome," she shot back, her eyes flashing with a mixture of fear and defiance. Their standoff was interrupted by the sheriff's low whistle. "They've got dynamite," he said, peering through a gap in the shuttered windows. "They're going to try to blast us out." A tense silence fell over the group as they absorbed this news. If the Blackburns had explosives, their wooden fortress wouldn't stand a chance. "We need to split up," Patrick decided. "Sheriff, you and Oliver take the back of the house. Mr. Cole, the upstairs windows. Eliza and I will cover the front." When Harold looked like he might protest, Patrick added, "She'll be safer with me than anywhere else." The others moved to their positions, leaving Patrick and Eliza alone in the front room. Outside, the gunfire had momentarily ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow more frightening. "If they've got dynamite, why aren't they using it?" Eliza whispered, crouched by the window opposite Patrick. "They're waiting for something," Patrick replied, his eyes scanning the darkness outside. Or someone. As if summoned by his words, a lantern flared to life in the yard, illuminating Victor Blackburn as he strode confidently into the open, flanked by two gunmen. "Cole!" he called, his voice carrying easily in the still night air. "Last chance. Come out, sign the deed," and everyone walks away. Harold appeared at the top of the stairs, his face set in grim lines. "Don't answer," Patrick advised. "He's trying to draw us out." But Harold shook his head. "If I don't go out there, he'll blow this house to kingdom come with all of us in it. I can buy you time, maybe create a distraction." "Pa, no!" Eliza moved toward the stairs, but Patrick caught her arm. "He's right," he said quietly. "We need time to get you out of here." Eliza pulled away from him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't be serious. They'll kill him." "Not right away," Patrick replied, his voice low and urgent. "They need his signature. That gives us a chance, but only if you trust me." Harold was already coming down the stairs, his face set with determination. Eliza looked between her father and Patrick, torn between loyalty and the desperate hope that Patrick had a plan that might save them all. "What do you need me to do?" she finally asked. Patrick's relief was palpable. "There's a cellar door on the east side of the house. When your father goes out, the Blackburns will focus on him. That's our chance to slip out and circle behind them." Harold approached them, checking his pistol one last time. "Take care of my daughter," he said to Patrick, his voice gruff with emotion. Patrick met the older man's gaze steadily. "With my life, sir?" Harold turned to Eliza, cupping her cheek with his calloused hand. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. I know I am." Eliza fought back tears, knowing this might be the last time she saw her father. "I love you, Pa. I love you too, sweetheart." He squared his shoulders and moved to the door. "Give me 2 minutes, then make your move." With that, he lifted the bar and stepped out into the night, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. "Blackburn," they heard him call. "Let's talk, just you and me." Patrick was already moving, pulling Eliza toward the kitchen at the back of the house. The sheriff and Oliver were there, their faces questioning. "Mr. Cole is buying us time," Patrick explained quickly. Sheriff, I need you and Oliver to keep up covering fire from the windows. Make them think we're all still in here while Eliza and I circle around behind." Sheriff Tanner nodded, understanding immediately. "What's your plan once you're out there?" Patrick's expression was grim. "The dynamite. If we can get to it before they use it, maybe turn it against them." "It's suicide," Oliver blurted. "It's our only chance," Patrick countered. He turned to Eliza. "You don't have to come. You could stay here." "Don't even suggest it," she interrupted, checking her pistol with steady hands. "He's my father. I'm coming." Outside, they could hear Harold and Blackburn talking, their voices too distant to make out the words. Patrick eased open the cellar door, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. He went first, helping Eliza down after him. The cellar was dark and musty, lit only by what little moonlight filtered through the small ground-level windows. They moved carefully through the space, reaching the external cellar doors that led out to the east side of the house. "Ready?" Patrick whispered, his hand on the latch. Eliza nodded, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give them away. Patrick pushed open the doors slowly, revealing a slice of night sky. No shots rang out they hadn't been spotted yet. They emerged into the cool night air, crouching low as they made their way along the side of the house. From their position, they could see Harold standing in the yard, his back straight, despite his injured arm. Blackburn stood a few yards away, a sheet of paper the deed, presumably in his hand. Around them, at least 8 gunmen were positioned, their attention focused on the negotiation. "Where would they keep the dynamite?" Eliza whispered. Patrick scanned the area, his eyes narrowing as he spotted a saddlebag leaning against a tree at the edge of the yard. "There. See how carefully they've placed it? And they're keeping their distance." They began to circle the perimeter of the yard, using the shadows and outbuildings for cover. Twice they froze as a gunman looked in their direction, but the darkness concealed them. They were halfway to their target when a shout went up from the house. One of Blackburn's men had spotted their absence. "The girl's gone!" the man yelled, and suddenly the yard was in chaos. Blackburn grabbed Harold, pressing a gun to his head. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Where's your daughter?" Harold's only response was to drive his elbow into Blackburn's stomach, knocking the wind from him. In the same motion, he lunged for Blackburn's gun. The shot was deafening in the night air. Harold staggered, then fell to his knees, a red stain spreading across his shirt. "Pow!" Eliza's scream tore from her throat before Patrick could stop her. She broke cover, running toward her fallen father. Patrick had no choice but to follow, firing at the closest gunman to clear a path for her. The air filled with the sound of gunshots as the sheriff and deputy opened fire from the house, providing what cover they could. Eliza reached her father, cradling his head in her lap. Harold's eyes fluttered open, finding hers. "Run," he whispered. "Please, run." "I'm not leaving you," she said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. Patrick reached them, putting himself between the Coles and Blackburn, who was recovering from Harold's attack. "It's over, Blackburn," Patrick called, his gun aimed steadily at the gang leader. "The sheriff's already sent for the marshal. You kill us, you'll hang for sure." Blackburn laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "The marshal won't find anything but a tragic accident. A family killed when their lamp overturned, setting fire to their house. So sad." As he spoke, 2 of his men were moving toward the saddlebag with the dynamite. Patrick saw them, but couldn't risk taking his attention off Blackburn. "Eliza," he said quietly, not looking away from Blackburn, "how's your aim at a distance?" Through her tears, Eliza followed his gaze to the men with the dynamite. "Good enough," she replied, gently lowering her father's head to the ground and drawing her pistol. "Now," Patrick shouted, diving toward Blackburn as Eliza fired at the saddlebag. Her shot found its mark not hitting the dynamite directly, which would have killed them all, but striking the lantern one of the men was holding. The glass shattered, spilling oil and flame onto the saddlebag. The explosion that followed was deafening, a ball of fire erupting where the 2 men had stood. The force knocked everyone to the ground, sending a cloud of dirt and debris into the air. In the confusion, Patrick grappled with Blackburn, the 2 men rolling on the ground, fighting for control of Blackburn's gun. Eliza crawled back to her father, shielding his body with her own, as gunfire erupted once more. The sheriff and deputy had used the distraction to emerge from the house, firing methodically at Blackburn's disoriented men. One by one, the gunmen fell or surrendered, throwing down their weapons when they realized their leader was caught. Patrick finally gained the upper hand, wrenching the gun from Blackburn's grasp and striking him hard across the face with it. Blackburn went limp beneath him, unconscious or feigning it. Patrick wasn't taking chances either way. He quickly bound the man's hands with his own belt before rushing to where Eliza knelt beside her father. Harold's breathing was shallow, his face ashen, but his eyes were clear as they found Patrick. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Yes, sir," Patrick replied, placing a gentle hand on the older man's shoulder. "We won." Harold's gaze shifted to his daughter. "Eliza—" "I'm here, Pa," she said, taking his hand. "Just hold on, we'll get the doctor." But Harold shook his head slightly. "No time for that. Listen." He drew a labored breath. "The ranch is yours now. Do what you think is right." His eyes moved back to Patrick. "Take care of her. She's stubborn, like her mother." "Pa, don't talk like that," Eliza pleaded, tears falling freely now. "You're going to be fine." Harold managed a weak smile. "I'll be with your mother soon. That's fine enough for me." His gaze grew distant, looking at something only he could see. "Sarah," he whispered, and then he was gone, his hand going limp in Eliza's grasp. The days that followed passed in a blur for Eliza. The funeral, the visits from neighbors who had been too afraid to help but were quick to offer condolences, the official statements to the territory marshal. When he finally arrived, all of it felt like she was moving through a thick fog, disconnected from the world around her. Patrick stayed. He helped with the ranch, took care of the legal matters surrounding the Blackburns' arrest, and most importantly, he was simply there when she needed someone to lean on. 2 weeks after the funeral, Eliza found him on the porch at sunset, staring out at the land that had nearly cost them everything. "The marshal says Blackburn will hang," she said, sitting beside him on the bench her father had built years ago. "The railroad's denying any knowledge of his activities, of course." Patrick nodded, unsurprised. Corporations protect themselves first, but at least Blackburn and his men won't hurt anyone else. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I've been thinking," Eliza finally said, "about what to do with the ranch." Patrick turned to look at her, his expression carefully neutral. "And what have you decided?" "I'm keeping it," she said firmly, "but I'm also going to sell the eastern section to the railroad on my terms. They'll get their line, but they'll route it away from the house and the best grazing land." She paused, gathering courage for what she wanted to say next. "But running this place alone would be impossible. I'd need help, a partner." Patrick's eyes never left her face, searching for her meaning. "You have plenty of options. You could hire a foreman or—" "That's not the kind of partner I mean," Eliza interrupted softly. Understanding dawned in Patrick's eyes, followed by a warmth that chased away the evening chill. "Eliza," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "are you saying what I think you're saying?" She turned fully toward him, finding courage in the way he looked at her, as if she were the most precious thing he'd ever seen. "That day by the tracks, when you cut me free and said I was coming home, I didn't know then that home would turn out to be wherever you are." Patrick reached out, his calloused hand gentle as it cupped her cheek. "I came west seeking vengeance," he said quietly. "I never expected to find love instead." "Is that what this is?" Eliza asked, her heart thundering in her chest. "Love?" In answer, Patrick leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a promise of protection and passion in equal measure. When they finally parted, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've known it since that first night at my cabin," he confessed. "When I watched you sleep and realized I'd do anything to keep you safe, not just because it was right, but because the thought of a world without you in it was unbearable." Eliza's hands found his, their fingers intertwining just as they had that night on the porch, a lifetime ago. "Stay," she whispered. "Be my partner in the ranch, in life, in everything." Patrick's answer was another kiss, deeper than the first, sealing a promise that needed no words. Spring came to the Cole Ranch with a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. The railroad tracks now curved respectfully around the property, a testament to Eliza's shrewd negotiations. The money from the land sale had allowed for repairs to the house and barn, plus the purchase of new breeding stock that would ensure the ranch's prosperity for years to come. The wedding was a small affair, held beneath the cottonwood tree where Eliza's mother was buried. Sheriff Tanner officiated, his booming voice carrying across the valley as Patrick and Eliza exchanged the vows. The entire town turned out to celebrate. The same people who had once been too afraid to stand against the Blackburns now eager to toast the couple who had freed them from that terror. As the sun set on their wedding day, Patrick found his bride standing on the porch, looking out at the land that was now truly theirs. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Adler?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. Eliza leaned back against his chest, covering his hands with her own. "Not a single one," she replied, turning in his embrace to face him. "Though I am wondering if our children will be as stubborn as both their parents." Patrick's eyes widened, his hands instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "Children? Are you?" Eliza laughed, shaking her head. "Not yet, but someday, when we're ready." Relief and joy mingled on Patrick's face as he pulled her closer. "A family?" he said, as if testing the word. "I'd like that." "We already are a family," Eliza reminded him, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "You and me. It started the moment you cut me free and said I was coming home." Patrick smiled against her lips. "Best decision I ever made." As darkness fell around them, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, the past behind them and the future. Their future stretching out before them like the vast western sky, full of promise and possibility. 2 years later, Patrick stood on that same porch, bouncing a fussing infant in his arms while watching Eliza in the garden, her rounded belly evidence of their second child on the way. Their daughter, Sarah, named for Eliza's mother, had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. "She's got quite the temper," observed Sheriff Tanner, who had stopped by with news from town. Patrick chuckled, pressing a kiss to his daughter's dark curls. "Like her mother." "I heard that," Eliza called, straightening with some difficulty and making her way toward them, a basket of vegetables on her hip. The ranch had flourished under their care, becoming one of the most prosperous in the territory. The railroad had brought new opportunities, just as it had threatened destruction before. Life had a way of balancing itself out. Patrick had come to believe. As Eliza joined them on the porch, taking their now content daughter into her arms, Patrick felt the familiar surge of gratitude that had become a daily part of his life. From the darkest moment of his brother's death had come the greatest joy he could imagine: a wife he adored, a growing family, and a home that was truly their own. "What news from town?" Eliza asked the sheriff, settling into the rocking chair Patrick had built when she was expecting Sarah. "Train robbery down south, but nothing that should concern you folks," Tanner replied. "And a letter came for you, Patrick, from back east, looks like." Patrick accepted the envelope, recognizing his sister's handwriting immediately. He'd written to her after the wedding, inviting her to visit her new family in the West. "She's coming," he said, after scanning the letter, his smile widening. "My sister's finally agreed to visit. She'll be on the train next month." "That's wonderful," Eliza exclaimed. "Sarah will finally meet her aunt, and maybe the new baby will wait until she's here." As the sheriff took his leave, promising to return for Sunday dinner, Patrick sat beside his wife, watching their daughter drift off to sleep in her mother's arms. "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly, the question rising from some deep part of him that still sometimes couldn't believe this life was really his. Eliza looked at him with the same love and certainty she'd shown on their wedding day. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied. "Are you?" Patrick took her free hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I found you tied to the railroad tracks, cut you free, and said you were coming home," he reminded her. "Little did I know I was the one who had finally found my way home." As the sun set on another day in their shared life, Patrick Adler thanked whatever twist of fate had led him to that dusty stretch of tracks on that fateful day. In seeking justice for his brother, he had found not only that, but love, family, and a purpose greater than vengeance could ever be. And Eliza, watching her husband's face in the golden light of evening, silently thanked the same fate that had brought this man into her life, first as her rescuer, then as her protector, and finally as the love that had healed them both.